If you've just been promoted and you're wondering what to do, make sure you listen to this episode. Hello everyone, I'm Garrett Tesla, founder of the Squad Room, where we help you transform your leadership, create more resilience, and generate more balance in your life. I started the Squad Room because I was searching for those answers for myself. And as I dug deep into personal development and dealing with the stress of my job as a cop, I quickly realized that I was not alone. So the Squad Room is here to help you become the person you want to be. And we give you access to some of the best experts in the world to help you do that. If you're new to the show, thanks for being here. And don't forget to follow or subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any of this valuable information that literally could change your life. We all need coaches and mentors in our lives, and we have literally hundreds of hours of free content on this show and at thesquadroom.net on growing your leadership, raising your emotional awareness, mastering stress, arresting anger, and creating more balance in your life. Now, let's get to today's episode so you can implement some of these lessons into your life. And trust me, many of these lessons are hard won. There are blood, sweat, and probably a few tears behind what we share on this show. But the whole point is to help you navigate these tough careers during these incredibly challenging times. So listen closely and maybe even take a couple notes so that you can execute on some of the lessons you learned today. I also challenge you to share this message with friends who are committed to personal development like you. It's important that all of us spread some positivity in these difficult times. It's the responsibility of each of us to lead where we can, and you can do that right now by taking these lessons and sharing them with others. Also, make sure to DM me or tag me on Instagram at The Squad Room so I can cheer you on or answer questions. And I'd love it if you wanted to reach out by email to me. It's garrett@thesquadroom.net. Thanks for listening. Now let's begin. In this video, I'm going to take the last 10 years of lessons that I've learned from being a supervisor out in the field and in the office, supervising sworn officers and civilians alike, and give you 11 tips that I've discovered and that I've dealt with and that I've made mistakes on in my career to help you. So today, as I sit here recording this, it's the 10th anniversary of my promotion to sergeant 10 years ago. Kind of blows my mind. And in that time, I did about 9 years as a sergeant and then was promoted just about a year ago to lieutenant. And so my time as a supervisor really is at that frontline level. And I've learned a ton in in those 9 years. I was a patrol sergeant for a long time. I oversaw our forensics bureau with civilian staff for a brief bit, and then was also professional standards, internal affairs, and supervised detectives there. And then as a lieutenant, I've run stations. I've acted as a chief of police services. I've run bureaus from as large as 43 people down to like 9 people. Wide breadth of experience. I have a master's degree in public administration with an emphasis in public sector leadership and management. So very much a thing that I'm passionate about, something that I'm a student of myself. I always try to learn. I'm reading books on this constantly and applying things and making mistakes and trying new things, iterating ideas, putting things out there to see if what I've learned in the classroom or I've learned in a book or I've learned from a mentor is actually valuable or is actually working. And so today, I want to give you 11 tips for new supervisors. You know, it's been 10 years now that I've been a supervisor, at least in the capacity of law enforcement. I was a manager and a supervisor in my time in the public sector before that, but in 10 years, 10 years, I just jotted down 11 things that I think any new supervisor needs to know, needs to use. And so hopefully if you're looking at getting promoted, just got promoted, or maybe you're struggling with getting some basic steps in, hopefully these things can help you out. All right, so here we go. All right, the first thing, and it's something that I see people do often, and it's kind of a natural knee-jerk reaction, is to come into either a new squad or a new bureau, new station, and start making changes like right away. Start renaming things for the sake of renaming them and putting things in place that may not necessarily need to be there or not. Don't just jump head in and feel like you've got to make a name for yourself right away. It creates a lot of disruption. It creates a lot of stress on the people that are already there. And you may end up making mistakes and taking away or adding to or complicating a system that already works well. So don't make a change right away. Sit down, take a breath, get the lay of the land before you start looking at what you need to make changes on. Now, of course, that doesn't apply for anything you see that's unethical, immoral, or needs to be stopped. But in the day-to-day work, don't jump in and start making changes right away. Now, next tip is to ask why often. Sound like a little toddler. My kids, when they were young, would always run around going, why, daddy, why? It's the same with supervision. Ask why things are done. Don't assume that they haven't tried to do it a better way and that they're just lazy. Like, ask why the process is in place. You will learn a lot about what some of the challenges are that they might be facing. You might come up with some solutions together. You might understand what they've already tried in a situation that hasn't worked in the past. And asking why, especially on a front line, you're running a patrol squad or something like that, asking why is really important so you begin to understand the thought process and the skill level and the education level of the people you're working with and the experience level, most importantly. Asking why a lot will help you understand that. And then if you agree, make sure they know. Don't just walk away and leave them guessing about whether you approve or not. If you approve of what they're doing and you approve of the way things are, make sure that they know about it and tell them. The next is to seek input wherever you can, and then to also make sure that you learn from the stakeholders what their priorities are. Now, the stakeholders are probably going to be your immediate supervisor, but it could be their supervisor as well. It could be potentially some influential elected officials. It could be your chief of police or your sheriff, obviously. It could be the school district. It could be the neighbors or a neighborhood watch or a community group. Understand what their priorities are and what their interests are and learn from them, and then set the expectations of your people accordingly. Now, always defer to the expectations and the priorities of your chain of command, but it always helps to get a big picture, broader picture view of what those other people might be looking at too, and there's a great chance that they're actually going to line up really well. So if you understand that, say, a neighborhood watch groups program where priority is bike theft, and you can help achieve that or maybe lower that, you're still achieving the objectives of your organization and you're reaching out beyond the silo of your agency to do that. So make sure that you seek input and you understand the priorities of your stakeholders, including your chain of command. The next one, number 4, is similar to number 1, but a bit different. Make sure that you watch how they work, they being the people that now report to you. Make sure you watch how they work before you make any changes and before you start instituting or instilling any of this negative discipline out there. Always come in with positive discipline if you can, but wait to understand how they work before you start making changes. Understand what a particular person's interests are, whether they're a dope cop or a traffic cop or a gang cop or what they like to do, and understand how you can support those things. And don't always assume that you have to have a full squad of hard charging type A go-getters, because you're probably rarely going to have that, if ever, in your career. You're going to have a wide, diverse mix of people, and knowing what they like and what their priorities are and what their personalities are like is going to help you plug them into the right spots to make the entire team but more successful. All right, next up, when you do eventually make changes, and you probably are going to make some because everybody's different and everybody likes to manage a little differently, make sure you introduce changes slowly. Don't come in on a Monday morning and all of a sudden have this long laundry list of new expectations and new methods and new protocols and all the new to-dos. And you're going to create a lot of disruption and stress. You're going to create a lot of undue work, and give people some time to get to know you. Even if you've worked with these people your whole career, if you're new in this situation or new in the role as a supervisor, you're going to be dealing with a dynamic that's new to you, and then their relationship with you is now new also. Keep in mind that, you know, the old adage or the old story of like the guy who gets promoted and forgets where he came from, or how the relationships do change when you do become a supervisor, and they definitely do, and they should. But you can mitigate a lot of that by slowly introducing change and doing it very carefully, methodically, and don't overload everybody. Then from there, the next tip is on change is, when you do make a change, any change, explain why you're making the change and why you think your way is better. Understand that your predecessor might be upset, and that if you have people on a squad or in a division or bureau who've done it the old way for a long time, they're going to gripe. The only things cops hate are change and the way things are, right? So if you don't explain yourself and you don't give some empathy towards the fact that this is going to be a change, even if it's a minor one, it's just different from the operating procedure that they're typically used to. And organizationally, changes are constant. So you might see this change as minute or minuscule or not a big deal, but when you couple it with all the other changes that are always going on in an agency, from promotions and retirements to transfers and testing and interviews and all that sort of stuff, plus the dynamic of just responding to 911 calls, that stuff is always changing. And any kind of a change can be very disruptive. So explain the process, explain it, and then be open to their comments about it, and just try to articulate why you think the change is good. And if you can't do that, you're probably not supposed to be making a change. If you can't articulate why a change is going to be for the better, maybe you need to second guess it and take a better look at it. All right, the 7th tip for new supervisors is simple. Lead by example. That's all you got to do. Lead by example. Demonstrate the kind of activity, the kind of behavior, the kind of tone, the kind of empathy, the kind of compassion you want for the public. Demonstrate all those things for your people and for the public so they have somebody to watch and guide on. I had a job in gangs where I used to work with all the squads in a station, in this particular station that we have. And so throughout my time there, I could see very clearly how a squad would take on the personality of their supervisor, in this case, the sergeants, and how 5, 6, 7 people, 8 people could easily become just like the sergeant based on that sergeant's strong personality or weak personality. If you had a strong sergeant who was a go-getter, you had a squad of strong go-getters. If you had a sergeant who was maybe weak and a little rudderless, you had a squad that was weak and rudderless, and they would take on the language of the supervisor and the tone and their attitude. It was crazy. And then you would watch a new supervisor who maybe gets promoted into that spot, and within a couple of months, the squad could be completely different. Even though the people haven't changed, the only thing that changed was the supervisor. And it was all because a new supervisor came in, led a little differently, and people are social creatures. Our goals are to be socially inclusive and included. So we take on characteristics of the people who lead us. And within a couple of months, you could have a night and day squad from rudderless to hard charging. It was really a wild experience to see. And that was always because a sergeant was leading by example. Now, this next one is really important. It took me forever to learn this one, and it was a lot of heartburn and heartache until I really figured it out. And it took somebody pulling me aside and telling me this one before I even thought of it. And I still didn't believe it for probably a couple of years after they told me. It's that you can't, and I touched on it a little bit ago, you can't expect an entire squad of hard charging type A alpha cops. It's just not going to happen. And maybe it will, but it's not going to happen for very long before someone gets transferred, someone gets promoted, someone retires, someone gets hurt. And so there's going to be a constant momentum, or there's gonna be a constant shift and change in the dynamic of a squad. And I always wanted to run hard charging squads that were going out and looking for crime. And, our goal every night was felony arrests and filling up the prison, to be honest. And I didn't always have squads of those kinds of people. I had great workers, hard workers, and I had some slugs for sure, but they all filled a role somewhere in that they filled their place. And if I had someone who didn't love to go out and make arrests, well, now I had a transport car, or maybe a paper car. And if I had a dude who was just a visionary with hooking dope or guns or gangsters, I wasn't going to saddle them with a stale bike theft report. And so there's a balance there as well. You can't always just hammer the low producing people with the reports, but emphasize where your people's strengths and abilities are and their talents are, and you'll get more out of them and you'll get more productive as a squad. If you constantly expect a low performer or someone who's low speed to function in fifth gear, all you're going to do is burn yourself out and be incredibly frustrated by the process. Because we all know slow and lazy cops are here to stay. But if you use them appropriately, you can actually 10x your output, because you can put your positive and your powerful people into better positions to use their resources. And then that's what becomes your force multiplier. So accept that you're going to have people of a wide variety of skills and a wide variety of talents, and not everybody's going to be the kind of cop that you want to be. And to that point, here's something to think about. Police work is so varied, so dynamic, so across the spectrum that you need people who are good with, say, like high schoolers and junior high kids. You need people who are good school resource officers, right? Who can talk to kids and to interact with juveniles. I hate that stuff, but I'm so glad that someone is there to do it, right? Because that means that we have that connection and we have that ability, and it doesn't have to be me. Now, on the other end of that spectrum, you might have some hard-charging, high-and-tight SWAT cop who's Mr. Tactical everything, and he can't talk to the kids, but he knows everything about explosive breaching or SWAT tactics or kicking the door, whatever it is. You need both. And then somewhere else on that spectrum, you need someone who's good with the media and can talk to the media. And you need someone else who's good with budgets to figure out how to pay for the cars. Policing is so dynamic and so massive of an undertaking that you need all those talents. So don't assume that just because someone isn't hard charging, isn't going out and grabbing a felony arrest every night, don't assume that they don't have any talent. You just haven't found it yet, is more likely. All right, next one is kind of controversial for some people, but I have found it to be absolutely crucial in the success of my career in leading other people and in supervising, is to get really good at debriefs. Really take those after action reports, those hot washes, whatever you want to call them, seriously on any sort of critical incident you go to, any sort of big event you go to, and deconstruct what happened, what could go better, what went well, and what went wrong. And if you can get to a point where you and your subordinates, I hate that word, but you know what I mean, people who work with you, if you can get to a point where you can all be honest with each other and out in the open about the challenges that were faced, the miscommunications that were made, the things that went well, all those things, you're going to be so much better. You're going to be so much safer. You're going to keep your people safer. And obviously that's probably should be your biggest goal, right? And you're going to all get better. And so good debriefs are crucial. And the way to do a good debrief, probably should do a whole video on this at some point, a whole podcast on just doing a debrief. But the really crucial part of it, as the supervisors, they're expecting you to start off with a lot of criticism and throw in a lot of blame. And the first thing you do is raise your hand and you acknowledge the mistakes you made or the things you could have done better. And that sets a tone for honesty and that you are willing to accept feedback. And when you do get feedback that you don't like, that might strike your ego a little bit, accept it. Don't get defensive. Just accept it and understand that it's part of this process that we're all trying to get better. Now, the next one is not one that I'm a huge fan of, but I've used it a few times with some troublesome employees, and it might be an option for you if it's something that you're dealing with. If you have someone who's just not going with the program, who's not listening, who's not even doing the bare bones basics of the job, you might want to consider doing something that you might call sort of a contract or an employment contract. But it's setting your expectations really, really clearly for some people. Now, most people aren't going to need it. They're going to get it through your example. They're going to get it through the quality briefings you put in. They're going to get it through your language and your tone, all those things. But some people are just not going to get it. And you might have to actually write down in bullet point form what you expect from people. And really what that's going to have to be is essentially the job description of whatever they're in. You're not going to be able to hold them to a standard legally to get to a position where you might need to fire them. You wouldn't be able to hold them to a standard that's higher than that of the organization, right? If they're doing the basic bare minimum job duties of a police officer, a deputy sheriff, corrections officer, a dispatcher, any of those things, then you're going to have a hard time in terms of trying to get them fired. But you can create a squad culture that is insistent on quality work or a higher level of work. And you're going to have to consider if this is worth it for you or not, but you can get there. And if you create a culture where people who are high performers want to come work, the people who don't want to be high performers are going to check themselves out of the process. They are not going to want to be involved in a group that is as high performing. But you might just be stuck with people sometimes before they can get that transfer, before they can get an assignment somewhere else. And you might actually have to write it out. But if you write it out, then you can refer back to it in disciplinary proceedings or in counseling sessions or in written memorandums or anything that you use. You can refer back to the things and say, hey, this is what I told you I expect and you're not following through. And they can't claim that they didn't know. So use it carefully, use it wisely, use it sparingly. But if you need to, create a job contract for some employees. All right, the last tip of the 11 tips I have for new supervisors on the 10th anniversary of my promotion to being one myself, is to constantly almost incessantly reinforce your expectations through conversations, whether they're informal conversations, one-on-ones over a coffee, or they're formal discussions about briefing trainings or employee performance reviews or any of the other things that we use. Praise them when they meet those expectations or when they exceed them. And yes, I said that right. Praise them when they just meet your expectations. Start there. And then really praise them openly and in front of others when they exceed them. Seek ways to promote them. And I don't mean just promote by rank, but show off their work to the people above you, show off their work to people around you, and direct the praise towards them. Don't be the one to step in front of it and take it yourself. You don't want to look like you're out shopping for it yourself on someone else's work, but make sure you understand that and praise their work to other people so that they get the benefit of being seen as doing good work. And then if you need to criticize, make sure that you're doing that in private. When you're addressing a group, you might have a group debrief. Keep that within the group. Keep it behind closed doors. Don't name names. If you're talking about a dynamic with other people, don't gossip, of course, with your squad or your team or your platoon about people within the squad, team, or platoon. Don't do that. But constantly reinforce your expectations through those conversations you have. Again, you're leading by example already, so it's not going to be that hard, and it shouldn't be a disconnect between how you act and what you expect from others, because if you're the kind of person who acts one way on the low bar or on the low road, but you expect everyone else to take the high road, the high bar, that disparity is never going to work. It's never going to work. And so you have to lead by example, meet your own expectations, but then set them for everybody else. And the only way that they'll ever get to your expectations is if they know what they are. And you have to constantly talk about them and reinforce them. All right, so there's 11 tips for new supervisors. I hope that helps you. Let me know. Drop a comment to me on socials at the Squad Room or in the comments below, and let me know what you think of those tips. Let me know what you might have for yourself or for other people. If you're a supervisor, what are the things that you use? What are the things that you have found to be true in your job? I'd love to hear what you have to offer and love to continue this conversation. So please drop me a line, drop me a comment, shoot me a DM, whatever it is. Let's keep the conversation going. If you want more content like this, stuff about self-development, leadership and policing, personal development for cops, that sort of stuff, make sure that you're following the Squad Room podcast on all the major podcast platforms. You're following me on YouTube at the Squad Room, and that you're also following us on socials at the Squad Room. All right, I'm Garrett Tesla. I'm a 17-year veteran for an agency in Southern California, and my goal in life is to build a world where first responders wake up inspired, feel confident at work, and go home safe, knowing they've spent their time in a worthy cause. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.